Data, there's still some buoyancy for the president. He's not collapsing by any stretch of the imagination. And it appears one of the reasons is satisfaction with aggressiveness on immigration.
Absolutely right. This is a story about balance. And the things that are going well in the public mind for him is his handling of immigration, which is still net positive, and his deportation program is still net positive and popular. People say, well, they don't think it'd be okay if there are legal residents who were mistakenly detained in this program, although there are some in his base who do. But you look at other aspects of this, like cuts to the federal workforce. That continues to be split. But you then also see a majority of people saying, well, that might impact programs that they care about. Even over a third of Republicans think that may happen. Again, a key measure to watch. And look, in terms of how this ties back then to that uncertainty in the economy, that could have an impact worth watching too.
Results matter, folks. Results matter. Now, as you saw from the intro, that was CBS, if I remember correctly, giving their thoughts about Trump's approval ratings. Actually, he's at 50%, way higher than the Democrats. And you can tell from the media that they're sitting here trying to poke. It's still net positive. That's a weird way of saying something, right? You should say, oh, it's positive. He's positive on this issue. It's still net positive, as in implying that, hey, we want this to go down. Like inflation. Inflation is still up. We need to bring that down, right? So it's almost like they're trying to signal to each other, hey, look, people still behind Trump when it comes to immigration. He's still getting some higher approval ratings. We can do something about this. And it's so funny sometimes the perspective that how like bias just, comes out of people. Now, I'm not saying he's being nefarious with it. I'm just saying it's an interesting way to put a sentence here. And I came across something recently from Professor Saint Ongi, I think. Depressed Democrats are junking up the economic data. Since Trump took office, hard data has been super on inflation, growth, and spending and incomes. Yet soft survey data is weak as legacy media convince Dems that the world is ending. Democrats could lose a lot of money. And I've been noticing that with a lot of the coverage that the media has been putting out. I just did a video about how populists are being banned from elections, the same kind of tactics that Democrats try to do here. Thank God for the Constitution. And I kind of wanted to play this clip from Stephen A. Smith because this survey stuff, right, which I highlighted here, actually, I'm going to play a little bit of this clip here. Give me a sec.
So influential that the Fed uses it as a guidepost for rates. The latest Michigan numbers are downright weird. So Republicans expect inflation for the next year to crash from 3.6% to just 0.1%, which is almost deflation. But Democrats expect inflation to soar from 1.7% under Biden to 6.5%. The hard data so far agrees with Republicans. I mentioned recently that Trump cut monthly CPI by half, while Truflation's real-time inflation is just 1.9%. But apparently what you see depends who you voted for. Same with Michigan's 5-year expectation.
So that's something we knew about it already. But this is something that when I say liberals are the true brainwashed ones, this is what I'm talking about. They're less likely to hear news of opposing opinions. They're less likely to associate with people with opposing opinions. This is liberals. This is Democrats that I'm talking about, especially Democratic women who is the core base of the Democratic Party. That's who they speak to. That's who they message to. That's their true constituents, not the black people, not the minorities. The liberal white woman is the true constituency of the Democratic Party. But I digress. I don't want to go into no racial stuff like Jasmine Crockett talking about whitewashed. But I want to play this clip about Stephen A. Smith. Yes, we're going to talk about him again because what he presents is something that, yeah, you get it. This is why I always joke around and think that Stephen A. Smith actually voted for Trump.
The man was impeached twice. He was convicted on 34 felony counts. And the American people still said, he's closer to normal than what we see.
Exactly.
Left. That's what they're saying. He's closer to normal. Why? Because something that pertains when you talk about the transgender community, for example, and you're talking about issues that pertain to less than 1% of the population, the Democratic Party came across as if that was a priority more so than the other issues. And so he comes into office. Now you're talking about childbirth, citizenship, and what have you. He knows that's not going to pass the mustard, but he knows that he made that promise. So when he shows up week 1 on Capitol Hill and he says, this is what we're going to do through an executive order, even though it's going to be shot down through the courts and what have you, he's saying, I kept my promise. A lot of other things that he's going to point to that he's going to try to do. I kept my promise. Then you turn around and you look at the left and you say, what promises did you keep? Now, you might know the answer to that. I'm certainly not questioning your knowledge about that at all. What I'm saying is what resonated with the voter. What voter out there can look at the Democratic Party at this moment in time and say, there's a voice for us, somebody that speaks for us, that goes up on Capitol Hill and fights the fights that we want them fighting on our behalf. They didn't do that. And that's why their behinds are home, and that man is back into the White House. And they want to sit up there and talk. You look at the networks right now. They're talking about, look at it. This is the latest. Look at him. Here he goes again. Well, you know what here he goes again means? He's doing what he said he was going to do. He promised you he was going to do these things, and he walked into office week 1, and that's exactly what he's doing. And he's saying, y'all do something about it. And when you try to do something about it, he's going to say, look at them now. Now they're concerned about these issues. Were they talking about that during the campaign? Hell no. That's really it.
And this is the sentiment I think the American people voted for Trump. And I think this is what liberals are missing in the election, right? Megyn Kelly shuts down New York Times journalist narrative on Trump. I don't give a damn or a she about Trump getting handsy with somebody 20 years ago. I want someone who will close the borders. That's what America, this is why look, guys, I do everything for a reason. That's why I led with that intro. America voted for Trump based on results. And if Democrats can't give a better result, they don't deserve power. And I think this is the practicality of politics that I want to bring to become the norm in American population. Hey, Americans, they don't care how you come across. They don't care if you speak proper English. They care about your ideas, how plausible your idea is, and if you have a plan or an ability to execute on what you promised. That's what American voters care about. If you don't appeal to that, you'll lose elections. That's what I want to become the norm in American politics. I'm tired of, I'm not tired, but I want to be a different kind of political commentator, right? I don't want to just comment on things, right? I'm very opinionated about how things should be in our government, how our system should run, and I like to battle on the ideas of stuff, right? Hey, make a better argument, not telling me how much this guy's a Nazi.
I just want to understand something clearly. Donald Trump was found liable for sexual abuse in a civil court. He's been accused by many women. You don't believe any of that?
I think the most serious thing I've heard about him has been the E. Jean Carroll allegation that he sexually assaulted her in a Bergdorf dressing room. And I don't believe one word of that.
There's
Not
many.
one word.
There are other women who have said.
I know. I've interviewed some of them. But
I don't know if this is going to be a hot take, but this is just my opinion. I don't believe someone's story just because they happen to be a certain skin color or a certain gender. I don't believe people just based on that. I don't care. I don't care what you are. I say, hey, did you went to court with this? No? Oh, I don't believe you. I don't have to believe you. I'm neutral, right? Oh, I experienced racism in my life. Oh, it's cool. You happen to be black, but I don't know if you're lying. So I'm going to just be neutral here. I'm going to say, yeah, you said this, but I'm not supposed to act on some statement you made and supposed to assume something about somebody because you claim that they did something to you or you claim that an event happened to you. I don't have to believe you. This is why Me Too got destroyed because many people started realizing women were using and abusing the social capital that people gave them based on their gender. Now people were like, oh, we'll wait and see. And now this is why I'm talking about with liberals. They love using emotionalism. They love to try to manipulate people emotionally by using stories like this. Oh, should we really put a convicted felon as president of the United States? You wanted them to have voting rights. You don't think convicted felons are allowed to work? Even if it's as president of the United States of America? Liberals are tongue-tied right there, but I digress.
look, the things I heard were included things like he got handsy on an airplane. Now, I don't know whether that happened or it didn't, but do I find that a deal breaker for a possible politician? Not really. At least I reported on their stories and did them the courtesy of bringing them to air in front of millions of people and let the audience make up its mind. My problem is more with these Democrats who will bury these allegations against their candidates or their candidate spouses and then play holier.
Doug Emhoff. Democrats, it's hard to argue against that. And this is the hypocrisy of the liberals and the Democrats that gets caught time and time again. This is the fake virtue of the Democratic Party that I talk about all the time. You sit there, you're saying you're holier than thou, yet Gavin Newsom, for instance, I remember during the debate stage, he said something about, oh, this guy, he has 3 divorces. He cheated on his wife. And we're like, Gavin Newsom, when you was mayor or something, I think when you was mayor of San Francisco, you got caught cheating on your wife. And you want to sit here and point fingers at Trump? Oh my God. And this is the kind of hypocrisy that people are finding out about the Democratic Party, that they package themselves differently and pretend that they're different than the other guy they're accusing. Every accusation is a confession. You want to say, hey, look, we're better than the Republicans on every single metric. And then when American people go by the metrics, Joe Biden was the worst candidate in 2020. Why the hell did the Americans have voted him in? He crashed our economy, gave us a recession, said it wasn't a recession, highest inflation rate in 40 years. Cost of living rose 20% under his entire administration. 23 unvetted people just stormed the border, increasing crime in areas. They lied to us, say crime was down. Then secretly, the FBI revised the data, crime was up. Told us the economy was strong. They revised the data, found out the economy was bad. And then they all admitted this after they lose the election. That's the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party brand is these people are swindlers who will do anything like gray area to manipulate you into voting for them. And this is one of their tactics. Oh my God, you put such a bad person in office. Don't you feel some kind of regret over that? No, I care about the results of the job he's doing. Logic, rationality. It needs to come back into politics.
Than thou when they're looking at Donald Trump.
Do you see yourself as a journalist still? Or would you not describe yourself
No,
like
I'm
that
still
anymore?
a journalist. I mean, I break news all the time. And when I sit with Trump or anybody else in the administration, I ask tough questions. I mean, as recently as September of 23, I interviewed Trump and he got so mad at me, he didn't talk to me for 6 or 7 months. So it's not, look, it's a tough job to do. You have to be able to hit the people you admire. And I do. You know, I've hit them all. Right before the election, I ripped on Trump's Madison Square Garden rally as too brotastic and got specific about why. You have to understand, like, if you haven't sold your soul, you have to be willing to criticize the people, even you, that you admire on your, quote, side.
And that's what liberal journalists, have not been able to do. They have not been able to do this to the Democratic Party. Or they've not been willing to do this to the Democratic Party. Liberals talk about, I remember there's a bunch of pieces out there saying that liberal journalists were saying that they can't be objective because if they are objective, it may help Trump win an election. That's what journalists were saying on opinion pieces in news outlets like the New York Times, that they're saying they could not be objective. Imagine that. They have openly admitted it. But Megyn Kelly, oh, do you still consider yourself a journalist? You see how she skirted that answer? She didn't want to dive deep into that because that's one of the number one problems with the Democratic Party. They have this fake pretend virtue of they want to look good but not actually be good. When it's time to be good, you find out you the same or worse than Trump. Trump is more honest because Trump don't pretend he's better than everyone else. He's like, look, I'm just like y'all, but I think I could do a better job if you put me in this position. That's Trump's whole proposition. And Democrats' whole proposition is, oh, you don't want to hire this Nazi. This Nazi is going to bring war. He's going to bring slavery back if you put him in office. All this fear-mongering, exaggeration. Do liberal journalists hold their own side accountable? No. Hey, aren't you exaggerating when you call Donald Trump a Nazi? Are you exaggerating when you call Donald Trump a racist when he has not said any statement that is racist? He won the NAACP award years back. How can this man be a racist, Democrats? Aren't you being hyperbolic with your language? A real journalist will ask a liberal that, a Democratic politician that, Joe Biden that, Kamala Harris that. But no, these people will sit here and pretend like, oh my God, we know how to do, we're real journalists. But at the same time, they go, we can't believe we missed the Hunter Biden laptop story. At the same time, they'll go, damn, we should have been more curious about the mental state of Joe Biden when it was discovered that, what, a month or two into his administration, it was found that he was mentally incapable of being president of the United States. Liberal journalists are telling you, saying, damn, we missed this one. We should have been more curious. Yes, you should have been more curious, but your bias got in the way because you didn't want your party to look bad. This is what I'm saying. This is all projection. This question here, when she's asking, do you still consider yourself a journalist? Megyn Kelly should be asking this New York Times journalist this question.
And he got so mad at me, he didn't talk to me for 6 or 7 months. So it's not, look, it's a tough job to do. You have to be able to hit the people you admire. And I do. You know, I've hit them all. Right before the election, I ripped on Trump's Madison Square Garden rally as too brotastic and got specific about why. You have to understand, like, if you haven't sold your soul, you have to be willing to criticize the people, even you, that you admire on your, quote, side. And my owning my bias by going out there on stage with Donald Trump and saying, I'm voting for him and you should too, is a bonus when it comes to my credibility. Now, everybody has zero doubt about where I stand, and they can filter everything I say through the appropriate lens. What typically happens in journalism is,
this is something that, like, this is why I laugh when, like, I get comments saying, Kenny, you're so biased. You're so biased. I'm honest. You have bias too. And anyone who sits here, the biggest liar is someone who's saying, I am objective. I am objective on this. No, you're not. No, you're not. You have some level of bias. You may be more objective than someone else, but you're not absolutely objective. You have some bias. You're human. Humans are thinking and feeling creatures. That means you have a bias. You may pretend you don't. You may pretend you may pretend that, oh, I'm unaffiliated with this person, but I can just look at the actions and the way that the media operate. Yeah, you got bias. You think, oh, so you want to get your news from CNN, CBS? And then when I point out the bias of CBS, oh, look, they covered Kamala Harris. 87% of news that they cover on Kamala Harris was positive. 87% of news that they cover on Donald Trump was negative. Doesn't that suggest that CBS is biased, is a biased news organization? Oh, but they got more credibility than me. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. But let's continue, because I think this is an interesting segment here.
they say they have no bias, and then they just work it out in the printed word or on their shows without owning it. But the audience knows it, and it creates a distrust and a divide. When it comes to Trump and me, no, my own personal opinion is most of the allegations against him are much more complicated than the mainstream media would have you believe. And I don't think Donald Trump is a rapist or a sexual assaulter. I do think he's taken inappropriate liberties with women and gotten handsy with them in a way he's owned himself. Okay. Years ago when he was a celebrity, and it is what it is. That's the past. But it's just about so much more than that. We are talking about how many people dying at the southern border because of the invasion that we've suffered under Joe Biden. We're talking about Laken Riley, whose killer was let in under Biden. We put him on a taxpayer flight down to Georgia where he murdered her. I don't give a shit about Trump getting handsy with somebody 20 years ago.
And this is where Democrats lose the argument. They care because they know that's the only way they could attack Trump. They can't attack Trump on the results. They can't attack Trump on the policy, because if it's just a policy debate, all the American people have to do is look 4 years back during Joe Biden's run and be like, yeah, Kamala Harris, all these things you're talking about, you could do it right now, but look at the results you gave us so far. On policy, you lose, Democrat. This is why I laugh when these people saying, oh, Kamala Harris had the better policies. No, she didn't. No, she didn't. I would not do anything differently than Joe Biden. Seals her fate. And you talking about you had better policies? No, you didn't. You pretend you do, but you don't. Look at the results. Oh, we're going to invest this amount of money for high-speed rail. High-speed rail never been made. Oh, we're going to put $42 billion towards solar. 2008, Obama. All the other companies went bankrupt except one, Tesla. And Tesla was paid back the loan that the government gave them with interest and 10 years early. But all the other ones, these solar companies, mysteriously went bankrupt after receiving $42 billion from the government. Make it make sense. But we're better on the policies. Realities have fact-checked that and said that was a lie. There's a reason why you're losing population numbers, blue states. But instead of being retroflective, you're being reactive because you want to maintain, I guess, your self-perception in this image that somehow Democrats are better at governing. But if you look at every objective metric of their governance, some of the highest crime rates, blue states, blue cities, right? Highest cost of living, blue states, blue cities. People who are running away from their places, blue states, blue cities. I'm glad here in Florida, people moving here has slowed down significantly. Yeah, there's some people who are moving back, but I don't know if that's because of return to office stuff. I don't know what the reasons are, but I do know one thing: California, they lost a lot of people, and it's not comparable to the amount of people that Florida lost. But what the liberal will focus on, what happened with Florida? Oh, look, what's wrong with Florida? Look. Protectionism. A part of me thinks that these liberals, they operate the way they do is because they want to protect their ego and their perception of the world. And they know that if they actually reflect and criticize their own side, it'll crumble this self-perception they have of themselves. And I think this is why they just neg on trying to hold themselves and their party accountable. Fight more, struggle more. For what? Like, what are you struggling for? Democrats? And what Democrats are for? Power and control. That's how I take it. Not solutions, not results. And this is what Donald Trump represents currently, right now, in our current political system. But I digress. Let me know your thoughts and perspective in the comment section below. How you feel about the current state of Donald Trump, his approval ratings, what he can improve more on. Do you agree with his 50% approval rating is a lot higher than the Democrats? I can tell you that. And what do you think about Megyn Kelly's segment at the end against the New York Times journalists and about journalism and bias and them pretending that they don't have any? I'd like to hear your thoughts and perspective on that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Please share this video if you feel so inclined. It really does help me out in the algorithm. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.